Restaurant manager dragged black waitress to bathroom. Unaware billionaire CEO was standing nearby. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's tale. It all started at an upscale restaurant, a place where the elite dined under chandeliers that glittered like stars. The clinking of fine silverware filled the air, and laughter echoed off the walls as guests sipped on expensive wine. But in the midst of this luxurious atmosphere, a dark moment was about to unfold. Naomi Brooks, a young black waitress, had worked at the Bayou Spoon for the past year. She had always maintained a quiet professionalism, moving between tables with grace, making sure every customer's needs were met. But she wasn't blind to the subtle whispers and looks that came from some of the wealthier patrons. They didn't see her as an equal, just another invisible part of the restaurant's backdrop. And tonight, it was no different. As she passed by a table, the restaurant manager, Harold Pierce, gave her an icy glance. He had never been particularly kind to her, always finding ways to subtly belittle her. Naomi had learned long ago not to make waves, not to cause trouble. She kept her head down, smiled politely, and carried on with her duties. But tonight, something shifted. Harold approached her with a forced, condescending smile. "Naomi, I need to speak with you. Now," he said, his voice cold and sharp. She paused for a moment, unsure of what had prompted his tone. Naomi had done nothing wrong. She was just doing her job. But the words from Harold hung in the air, and before she could respond, he grabbed her arm and yanked her toward the bathroom. She stumbled, her tray wobbling in her hands, the sudden harshness of his grip catching her off guard. Naomi tried to pull her arm away, but his hold was firm. He dragged her across the floor, past the tables of laughing guests who didn't even notice, and into the small, dingy bathroom. The moment the door slammed shut, Harold's smile disappeared. His eyes narrowed, and Naomi could feel the anger radiating off him. "You think you can just walk around here, acting like you're better than everyone?" he sneered, his voice low but menacing. Naomi's heart raced in her chest, but she kept her head down, her mind screaming for her to leave. She had endured this kind of treatment before, but it always left a bitter taste in her mouth. Harold was relentless, his insults coming faster now, each one landing like a slap across her face. Naomi had always prided herself on her ability to stay calm under pressure, but tonight, something inside her was starting to crack. She had had enough of being treated like she didn't matter. What Harold didn't know was that someone else in the restaurant had been paying attention. Just as Naomi's heart pounded in her chest, a shadow lingered in the hallway outside the bathroom. A man, tall and impeccably dressed, stood just beyond the door, overhearing every word. He was none other than Jackson Montgomery, the billionaire CEO of a tech empire worth billions of dollars. Jackson had come to Bayou Spoon for a quiet evening out, a break from the endless meetings and high-stakes deals. He hadn't planned on getting involved in anything, but when he heard Harold's voice raised in anger, he couldn't ignore the unease gnawing at him. Jackson's ears perked up as he listened more closely. He didn't know who the woman was, but he could tell she wasn't a part of this confrontation willingly. Something didn't sit right with him. He had seen this kind of behavior before, the condescension, the power struggle, the way some people with money and status thought they could control those beneath them. Jackson's instincts kicked in. He waited silently outside the door, watching as Harold continued his tirade. The situation was about to escalate, and Jackson knew he couldn't stand idly by. He was about to witness something he wasn't expecting, something that would change the course of Naomi's night forever. The tension in the bathroom grew thicker with each passing second. Naomi stood still, her arms crossed tightly in front of her chest, trying to block out Harold's venomous words. She wanted to run, to scream, to push past him and escape the suffocating atmosphere he was creating, but she knew, better than to make a scene. In this world, in this restaurant, making waves would only make things worse. But the more Harold ranted, the angrier Naomi felt. Her mind raced, her pulse quickened. She had taken so much from people like him, and now, she was done. The last straw was the low, mocking laugh that followed one of his insults. He thought he had all the power. He thought he could control her. He was wrong. Suddenly, there was a soft knock on the door, followed by a voice that Naomi didn't recognize. It was a man's voice, deep and calm, but firm. "Is everything all right in there?" Harold's face turned red with frustration as he whipped around to glare at the door. "None of your business," he spat. But the voice outside didn't back down. "I think it's my business when someone is being mistreated." Naomi's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know who this man was, but she could feel the shift in the room. The power dynamic was starting to change. Harold, who had once felt like the supreme authority, now looked unsure. The voice outside spoke again. "Step aside. I'm coming in." Without waiting for a response, the door to the bathroom creaked open, and in stepped Jackson Montgomery, the billionaire CEO Naomi had seen only a few times before in the restaurant. He wasn't supposed to be involved in this. This wasn't his fight. But when he stepped into the bathroom, something about the look in his eyes made Naomi realize this was no ordinary intervention. Jackson didn't look at her with pity. He didn't look at Harold with fear. He looked at both of them with the cold certainty of a man who had seen enough of this kind of abuse. "What's going on here?" Jackson asked, his voice still calm, but cutting through the tension like a knife. Harold blinked, clearly caught off guard by the unexpected intrusion. "Nothing you need to worry about," he muttered, trying to regain control of the situation. But Jackson wasn't having it. "It doesn't look like nothing," he said, his gaze turning to Naomi. His eyes softened for a moment before he addressed Harold once again. "This isn't how you treat people, and I'm not going to stand by and let you get away with it." Harold, who had been so sure of his dominance just moments ago, suddenly looked smaller. He stammered, not knowing how to respond to a billionaire CEO who wasn't afraid to challenge him. Naomi felt a small sense of relief wash over her, but she wasn't about to let the moment slip away. She took a deep breath, standing tall, as if Jackson's presence had given her strength. "I don't need anyone to fight my battles," Naomi said, her voice steady. "But I also won't be treated like this again." Jackson looked at her with respect, nodding slightly as he turned his attention back to Harold. "You're done here," he said simply. "I'm going to make sure of it." With that, Jackson stepped forward, placing a hand on Harold's shoulder and guiding him toward the door. "You need to leave now." Harold, too humiliated to argue, stumbled out of the bathroom, his face flushed with anger and shame. Jackson's gaze followed him for a moment before he turned back to Naomi, who was standing there, still processing what had just happened. She felt a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. Was this really happening? Was she really being treated with respect in a place she had always been overlooked? Jackson walked toward her, his posture relaxed now that the confrontation had passed. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Naomi nodded, though her heart was still racing. She didn't know what had just changed, but something had shifted. Jackson's presence, his intervention, had made all the difference. "Thank you," Naomi said, her voice quiet but genuine. Jackson smiled slightly. "You deserve to be treated with respect. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Naomi was left standing in the bathroom, alone now, but not completely empty. The power had shifted, and she could feel it. The restaurant, the staff, even the guests outside, they were all watching, and the story of what had just transpired would ripple out from this moment. Naomi had been dragged into the bathroom in a humiliating act of power, but she was walking out of it as someone who had just been seen, truly seen. And that, in itself, was a victory. The quiet that followed the confrontation in the bathroom hung in the air, but Naomi was far from calm. She stood there for a moment, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. It was as if the storm had passed, but she knew better then. To think the battle was over. She had just taken a small step toward reclaiming her dignity, but there was still so much to navigate. As Naomi made her way back into the restaurant, the eyes of the staff and guests were all on her. Some of them watched with wide eyes, others with narrowed glances, but she didn't let it faze her. She kept her head high, walking back to her station like nothing had happened. In truth, everything had changed. No one had ever intervened for her before. She had always been invisible, a cog in the machine, expected to just take it. But now, there was a shift in the atmosphere, something Naomi couldn't quite put her finger on. The moment had not gone unnoticed. Jackson Montgomery, the billionaire CEO, had stepped in when no one else would. His words, his presence, had made all the difference. Naomi had always worked hard to stay under the radar, to blend into the background, but tonight was different. She had been seen, and somehow, she knew that meant something. But just as she was beginning to process the whirlwind of emotions, Jackson approached her again, this time with a calm, steady smile. "You handled that well," he said, his voice sincere. Naomi glanced up at him, still surprised by the attention. "I didn't do anything," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "You did everything," Jackson said. "You stood up for yourself when it mattered. That's more than most people do." Naomi felt a rush of gratitude mixed with disbelief. She had always tried to stay strong, but hearing those words from someone like him, someone who had everything, it made her feel like she wasn't invisible anymore. Jackson's presence was commanding, but there was a warmth to him, an authenticity that Naomi couldn't ignore. He wasn't here to make a scene. He wasn't here for applause. He was here because he believed in standing up for what was right. "Listen," Jackson continued, his tone more serious now. "I don't think this should go unnoticed. I know you've been treated unfairly in this restaurant, and I want to make sure that changes." Naomi blinked, unsure of what he was saying. "What do you mean?" she asked. "You've been working hard, dealing with disrespect from people who don't appreciate you," he said. "But I see you, and I know others will too. I want to offer you a better opportunity." Naomi's heart raced as Jackson's words sank in. She hadn't expected this. She had never thought someone like him would take an interest in her life. But the sincerity in his voice was undeniable. "What kind of opportunity?" she asked cautiously, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm opening a new restaurant," he said, his eyes glinting with excitement. "A high-end place, but it's going to be different. I want people who have the right skills, the right mindset. People who have been overlooked and deserve a chance. I want you to be a part of it." Naomi could hardly believe her ears. She had spent so much of her life working multiple jobs just to make ends meet. But now, here was someone offering her a chance at something more. A real opportunity to prove herself, to be seen for the person she was, not just the work she did. Thank you," Naomi said, her voice barely above a whisper. She was overwhelmed, unsure of how to react. Jackson smiled at her, the kind of smile that made her feel like she was worth more than just a passing glance. "You deserve more than what you've been given. Don't ever forget that," he said. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Naomi standing there, her mind racing. This was the moment she had been waiting for her entire life. A chance to step into something bigger than herself. But as the reality of it all sank in, Naomi knew that this was just the beginning. Her life was about to change, and she wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face whatever came next. Naomi sat at the small table in her apartment, the phone in her hand shaking slightly as she stared at the message from Jackson Montgomery. The offer he had made seemed unreal. A chance to be part of something bigger, to move beyond the life she had been living, waiting tables, struggling to make ends meet, to being a part of something that could change her future. She had been offered a job at one of Jackson's new restaurants, a chance to prove herself in a way she never thought possible. Her mind raced as she thought about the opportunity, but she couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and fear. What if she wasn't enough? What if this was just another empty promise? She tried to push the doubts away, but they lingered. Just a few days ago, she had been humiliated by Harold, the restaurant manager, and now she had an offer from a billionaire CEO who had seen her for who she truly was. It was a lot to process. Naomi set the phone down and walked to the small window of her apartment. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained overcast, reflecting her mood. She felt like she was on the edge of something new, something big, but she wasn't sure if she was ready to jump. She thought about her daughter, Amara, and how much she wanted to provide a better life for her. The late nights, the long shifts, the constant struggle, it had all led to this moment. She couldn't turn back now. Taking a deep breath, Naomi picked up the phone again and typed a simple message back to Jackson. "I'm in. Let's make this happen." With that, she sent the message, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of hope. The next few days passed in a blur. Naomi received all the details about the new restaurant. Its grand opening was just weeks away, and Jackson had already made plans for her to start training with the rest of the staff. She would be part of the management team, helping to run the place and learning the ropes of leadership. Naomi felt a sense of pride swell within her as she thought about what this meant. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was going to be someone who made decisions, someone who could help shape the future of this new venture. The excitement was contagious, but so was the pressure. The restaurant would be high-end, catering to some of the wealthiest and most influential people in the city. There would be no room for mistakes, and Naomi knew that the challenges ahead would be tough. But for the first time, she felt ready. The first day of training came quickly. Naomi arrived at the new restaurant, her heart pounding with anticipation. She walked into the pristine space, the polished floors reflecting the soft light from the chandeliers hanging above. It was a far cry from the dimly lit, worn-out restaurant she had worked at before. The sleek design, the high-end furniture, the delicate details, it all felt like a dream. She was ushered inside, where Jackson greeted her with a warm smile. "Welcome aboard, Naomi," he said, his voice sincere. "We're glad to have you here." Naomi smiled back, feeling a sense of belonging that she hadn't experienced in a long time. As the day went on, she learned the ins and outs of the restaurant, meeting the other staff members and going over the plans for the grand opening. Jackson was there, guiding her every step of the way, teaching her the ropes. He was patient, kind, and attentive, and Naomi couldn't help but feel like she had found a mentor in him. She had always been used to taking orders, but now she was learning how to give them. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The restaurant took shape quickly, and Naomi's confidence grew with each passing day. She worked hard, pushing herself to be the best she could be, and Jackson was right there with her, offering support and guidance when needed. But there were moments when she doubted herself. There were moments when the old voices of self-doubt crept in, telling her she wasn't good enough, that she didn't belong in this world of wealth and power. But each time, she pushed through. She was not going to let those doubts control her. She had earned her place here. As the grand opening approached, Naomi felt the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. But she also felt something else, a sense of pride, a sense of accomplishment. She had come so far, and this was just the beginning. On the night of the grand opening, Naomi stood at the front of the restaurant, watching as the first guests began to arrive. The restaurant was buzzing with energy, the clinking of glasses and the laughter of guests filling the air. Jackson was by her side, his eyes scanning the room, his presence calm and commanding. Naomi knew that tonight would be a defining moment. She had worked for this. She had earned it. And as she greeted the first guests, her heart swelling with pride, she realized that this was only the start of her journey. The future was bright, and for the first time in a long time, Naomi believed she could truly make her dreams come true. As the days passed and the restaurant flourished, Naomi found herself sinking deeper into a new rhythm. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a part of something bigger. The guests who once overlooked her now respected her. The staff looked to her for guidance, and she had earned her place in the new establishment. With each passing day, Naomi grew more confident in her role, learning how to manage the operations, train new staff, and navigate the complexities of running a high-end restaurant. Jackson was always there, guiding her, offering advice, and pushing her to be the best version of herself. But as much as Naomi thrived in her new position, the pressure of the job weighed heavily on her. The restaurant was booming, and with success came the unrelenting demands of the job. There were nights when Naomi barely had time to catch her breath, her mind constantly focused on ensuring everything ran smoothly. She was up early, staying late, and taking on tasks that seemed endless. But in those moments of exhaustion, there was a fire inside her, a desire to succeed, to prove that she belonged here, that she was worthy of the opportunity she had been given. One evening, as Naomi was managing the dinner service, a situation arose that tested her in a way she hadn't expected. A high-profile guest, a well-known businessman, had been seated at one of the prime tables. He was a regular at the restaurant, and he demanded nothing less than perfection. The night was going smoothly until Naomi received a complaint about the food. The guest was dissatisfied with his meal, and the pressure was on to resolve the situation quickly. Naomi could feel the weight of the moment. She knew that in a restaurant like this, one mistake could cost them dearly. She approached the table with a calm demeanor, her hands steady as she greeted the guest. "Good evening, Mr. Foster. How are we tonight?" she asked, maintaining her professionalism despite the tension in the air. The guest, a tall man with sharp features and a smug expression, didn't bother looking up from his plate. "I'm not satisfied with this," he muttered, pushing the dish aside. It's not what I expected. I demand a replacement. Naomi nodded, taking in the situation. She knew this wasn't just about the food. It was about the experience, the power dynamic between the guest and the staff. Of course, Mr. Foster, she replied, her voice smooth and respectful. I'll take care of it immediately. Thank you for your patience. As Naomi turned to leave, she felt the eyes of the other guests on her. They were watching, waiting to see how she would handle this. She didn't let the pressure get to her. She walked back to the kitchen, where the head chef was already preparing a new dish. Naomi relayed the guest's request, making sure the replacement would be perfect. But as she returned to the dining room, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Jackson had stepped into the room, his sharp eyes scanning the situation. He walked up to Naomi with a slight nod of approval. You handled that well, he said, his tone reassuring. Naomi smiled faintly, appreciating the support. But just as she turned to address the table again, she heard a voice behind her. I don't want to speak to her. Mr. Foster's voice cut through the air. Naomi froze. The words stung more than she expected. She turned around slowly, trying to maintain her composure. The guest continued, his voice dripping with arrogance. I want to speak to the manager. Not her. Naomi's heart skipped a beat. She could feel the eyes of the room on her, waiting for her response. Jackson had already stepped in. He moved quickly toward the table, his presence commanding attention. Is there a problem here? He asked, his voice calm but firm. Mr. Foster, momentarily caught off guard, tried to regain his composure. This meal was unsatisfactory, and I'm not pleased with the service, he muttered, though there was a hint of hesitation in his voice now. Jackson glanced at Naomi, his eyes filled with understanding. Naomi has been with us from the very beginning, he said, his voice carrying authority. She's more than capable of handling the situation. There's no need for you to speak to anyone else. The room fell silent. Naomi felt a rush of gratitude for Jackson's support. She had always been used to being dismissed, to being ignored or belittled, but here she was, standing beside a man who believed in her. I'll ensure your new meal is served promptly, Naomi said, her voice steady. Mr. Foster seemed to realize the gravity of his words, and after a brief moment, he nodded, clearly not expecting Jackson's response. As Naomi walked away, her heart raced, but there was also a sense of pride swelling within her. Jackson's words had not only reaffirmed her worth, but they had also reinforced the growing confidence she had in herself. She was not just a part of the restaurant anymore. She was a key player, someone who had earned respect. That night, after the last guest had left, Naomi stood in the empty dining room, looking around at the polished floors and the elegant decor. She had come so far, from the shy, quiet woman who had once worked in the shadows to the confident leader she was becoming. And she knew that her journey wasn't over yet. With each challenge, with each victory, Naomi was becoming the woman she had always dreamed of being. The weeks following the grand opening had been a blur of excitement and challenges. Naomi had proven herself time and time again, and now, she was more than just a leader in the restaurant. She was a force to be reckoned with. Her new role as a manager came with its share of pressures, but she was handling them with a calm determination that was earning her the respect of both the staff and the guests. Jackson continued to offer his guidance, but Naomi was no longer the timid waitress she had been when she first started. She had grown into her role, stepping up to handle the day-to-day operations with confidence. But as much as Naomi thrived in her new position, there was always a sense of tension in the air. The restaurant, though wildly successful, was a high-stakes business, and maintaining its reputation was a constant battle. Naomi was managing everything from VIP reservations to staff training, making sure the kitchen was running smoothly and the guest experience was flawless. But she was starting to feel the weight of it all. One night, during a particularly busy service, Naomi found herself in the thick of the chaos. The restaurant was packed, the noise of clinking glasses and clattering silverware filling the air. She was overseeing the dining room, making sure the staff was on track, when an issue arose with a large reservation. One of the VIP guests had arrived late, and the kitchen had already prepared a special dish for them. Naomi knew that the restaurant's reputation hinged on getting this right. She made her way to the kitchen to make sure everything was perfect, but when she arrived, she was met with frustration. The head chef, Roberto, was standing by the stove, his face tight with anger. The dish isn't right, he said, his voice low but harsh. I don't know how we let this slip. Naomi took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. What's the issue? She asked, walking closer to the counter. The risotto was supposed to be creamy, but it's too dry. I told the prep team to double check, but they didn't follow through, Roberto explained, his frustration evident. Naomi knew this wasn't the time to argue. The guest was expecting perfection, and anything less would tarnish the restaurant's reputation. All right, we'll fix it, she said, her voice steady. Get a new batch started. I'll handle the rest. She moved quickly, her mind racing as she formulated a plan. Jackson had always taught her to stay calm under pressure, to think critically, and to delegate when necessary. Naomi put those lessons to work. She walked back into the dining room, her focus now entirely on handling the situation. The last thing she wanted was for the VIP guest to feel neglected or disappointed. She approached the table, her smile warm but professional. Good evening, Mr. Wills, she said, addressing the guest by name. I understand there was an issue with your reservation, and I want to personally ensure that everything is taken care of. Mr. Wills, a wealthy businessman, looked up from his phone with a raised eyebrow. I'm not happy about the delay, he said, his voice sharp. But I'm willing to overlook it if you can make sure the meal is exceptional. Naomi nodded, her heart racing. Of course, Mr. Wills. Your meal will be perfect. I'm personally overseeing it. She turned to the server nearby. Make sure the wine is paired correctly with the replacement dish, and bring it out as soon as it's ready. We can't afford to have any more mistakes tonight. The server nodded and hurried off. Naomi returned to the kitchen, where Roberto was already working on a new batch of risotto. She stood by his side, offering her support without saying a word. The kitchen hummed with activity, and Naomi found a sense of peace in the chaos. She was in control, and she knew that with the right effort, everything would fall into place. As the new dish was plated and sent out, Naomi took a deep breath. The tension in her chest loosened slightly, but she knew there would always be challenges. As she delivered the dish to Mr. Wills herself, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. He tasted the risotto, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Naomi held her breath. Then, to her relief, he smiled. This is much better, he said, nodding in approval. Good job. Naomi smiled back, relieved. Thank you, Mr. Wills. We appreciate your patience. As she returned to the kitchen to check on the rest of the orders, a sense of accomplishment washed over her. She had handled the situation with grace, and the restaurant had come through in the end. But there was more at play here than just the food. The real victory was in how Naomi had grown into her role. She had faced the pressure head-on and had proven to herself and to others that she was capable of managing the toughest of situations. But that night, as Naomi stood in the restaurant, watching the guests enjoy their meals, she realized that this was just the beginning of her journey. The road ahead would be filled with even more challenges, but she was no longer afraid. She was ready. The days that followed brought a sense of calm, but Naomi knew better than to relax too much. The restaurant's success was a delicate balance, and every day she faced new challenges. The smooth operations she had grown accustomed to were now disrupted by the increasing demands of a fast-growing business. She was working harder than ever, balancing her responsibilities as a manager, mentor, and the ever-present need to prove herself. But one night, as the restaurant neared its busiest time, Naomi learned that even the best-laid plans can come undone. The night began like any other, with the staff moving quickly to set up for the dinner rush. Naomi was overseeing the floor when she heard raised voices coming from the kitchen. Roberto, the head chef, was arguing with one of the new line cooks. Naomi immediately walked toward the kitchen to assess the situation, her instincts telling her something was off. She entered the kitchen to find Roberto pacing, his face flushed with anger. The cook, a young man named Marcus, stood across from him, his arms crossed defensively. Naomi didn't hesitate. What's going on? She asked, her voice calm but firm. Roberto turned to her, his frustration palpable. He's not following the standards I set. This is the third time today he's messed up an order. Marcus, looking embarrassed, spoke up. I'm just trying to keep up with the pace, chef. The orders are coming in too fast, and no excuses. Roberto cut him off. This isn't a fast food joint. If you can't keep up, you're not cut out for this kitchen. Naomi held up a hand to calm both men down. Let's take a step back, she said, her voice steady. Roberto, I understand your frustration, but we're all in this together. Marcus, I get it. The pace is tough, but we need to find a way to make it work. She turned to Marcus. You've been here for a few weeks now. Are you struggling with the process, or is it something else? Marcus hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. It's just, I'm trying to keep up with the speed, and sometimes I feel like I'm not getting the proper training. I've been in kitchens before, but this place is different. I just want to get it right. Naomi nodded, understanding the pressure. She knew that Roberto's kitchen could be intense, and not every new hire could handle it right away. Roberto, how about we set up a training session after service tonight? We can go over the process again with Marcus, make sure he's clear on everything. Roberto, still angry, looked at her, but after a moment, he nodded. Fine, but I don't have time for mistakes. Naomi turned to Marcus, offering a reassuring smile. We'll get through this. I'll be with you tonight to make sure you're comfortable. The tension in the kitchen began to ease, and Naomi felt a sense of pride. She had handled the situation without letting it escalate. As the night went on, Naomi found herself bouncing between the dining room, the kitchen, and her office, keeping everything running smoothly. Despite the challenges, there was a rhythm to it now, something she had never experienced before. She had earned the trust of her team, and they had earned hers. But as the clock ticked closer to closing time, Naomi's phone buzzed. It was a message from Jackson. I need to talk to you when you get a moment. Naomi felt a flutter of nerves. She had grown used to Jackson's calm demeanor, but his messages always seemed to carry weight. She stepped into her office, closing the door behind her, and read the message again. After a few minutes, there was a knock at the door. Jackson entered, a serious look on his face. Everything going well? He asked. Naomi nodded. Yes, the service has been smooth tonight. We had a few kitchen hiccups, but it's nothing we can't fix. Jackson didn't respond immediately. He walked over to her desk, sitting down across from her. Naomi, I've been thinking about something, he began. You've done a great job here. You've earned everyone's respect, including mine. But I've noticed you've been working nonstop, and I can see that the pressure is building. Naomi looked at him, a mix of exhaustion and pride in her eyes. I'm handling it, she said softly. I know I have to keep everything in balance, but sometimes it feels like there's more to do than there's time for. Jackson nodded, understanding. You've come so far, but you need to take care of yourself, too. I want you to take a day off. A real one. I'll handle things here for the day. Naomi opened her mouth to protest, but Jackson held up his hand. I'm serious. You can't pour from an empty cup. You've earned it. Naomi stared at him for a long moment. She hadn't realized how much she needed a break until now. The weight of the past few weeks, the constant striving to prove herself, had taken its toll. Okay, she said finally, her voice soft. I'll take the day off, but only if you promise not to make me feel guilty about it. Jackson smiled, his eyes warm. Deal. You've more than earned it. Naomi stood up, her shoulders lighter than they had been in weeks. Maybe this was what she needed. A break, time to reset, to reflect on how far she had come. Jackson was right. She couldn't keep pushing herself without taking care of her well-being. The next day, Naomi took a walk through the park, something she hadn't done in months. The sunshine felt warm on her face, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to just be. There was still so much ahead of her, but today, she would take a breath and appreciate the journey so far. After Naomi took the day off, she returned to the restaurant with a renewed sense of clarity. The park had been refreshing, but as she walked through the restaurant's front doors, she felt the familiar buzz of energy surround her. It was business as usual, and she was ready to dive back into it. Her time off had been just the reset she needed, and now, she was more determined than ever to make sure everything ran smoothly. That night, Naomi stood at the front of the restaurant, overseeing the evening service. The place was packed, the atmosphere buzzing with laughter and clinking glasses. She glanced over at Jackson, who was sitting at a corner booth, deep in conversation with a group of investors. He had become more than just her boss. He had become a mentor, someone who believed in her when no one else did. Naomi smiled to herself, proud of how far she had come. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind, but she had proven herself time and time again. As the night unfolded, Naomi moved through the dining room with the same grace and precision that had come to define her. She checked on tables, made sure the staff was on point, and resolved small issues as they arose. But it wasn't long before she noticed something unusual. One of the guests, a wealthy woman in a fur coat, was getting visibly agitated. Naomi approached the table, her instincts kicking in. "Is everything okay, ma'am?" she asked, offering a polite smile. The woman's face twisted with frustration. "No, everything is not okay," she snapped. "This service is dreadful. My steak is undercooked, and I've been waiting for an hour for my wine to be poured." Naomi took a deep breath, maintaining her composure. "I apologize for the delay, ma'am. I'll make sure your meal is corrected right away, and I'll personally see to it that your wine is poured." The woman rolled her eyes, clearly displeased. "I expect better. This is supposed to be a 5-star restaurant, and yet I feel like I'm being treated like an afterthought." Naomi's heart raced, but she didn't let it show. She nodded and turned to the kitchen, where she quickly relayed the issue to the chef. The staff, who had grown accustomed to Naomi's leadership, jumped into action. In minutes, the steak was being replaced, and the wine was on its way. Naomi returned to the table, offering an apologetic smile. "Your steak will be corrected, and your wine will be served immediately. I truly apologize for the inconvenience, and I appreciate your patience." The woman gave Naomi a begrudging nod, though she still looked irritated. Naomi could feel the weight of the situation. The guest wasn't happy, and despite her best efforts, there was little she could do to change her mood. But just as Naomi was about to walk away, she noticed Jackson making his way toward the table. His presence was calm but commanding, and Naomi immediately felt a sense of reassurance. Jackson approached the table with a smile. "Good evening, ma'am," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "I understand there's been an issue with your meal. I want to personally apologize for the inconvenience." The woman, who had been scowling moments before, softened slightly at the sight of Jackson. "Well, finally someone who understands," she said with a forced smile. "This is just unacceptable. I've been here before, and I've never experienced anything like this." Jackson nodded, his demeanor unwavering. "I understand your frustration, and I assure you, this is not the standard we hold ourselves to. I will personally make sure everything is corrected to your satisfaction. In fact, the meal will be on the house tonight, as a token of our appreciation for your understanding." Naomi watched, impressed by how Jackson handled the situation with such calm authority. The woman's attitude shifted, and she even offered a small smile as she nodded. "Well, I appreciate that. Thank you." Jackson gave her a polite nod before turning to Naomi, his eyes meeting hers with a subtle hint of approval. "Take care of the rest of the tables, Naomi. I'll handle this one," he said with a quiet confidence. Naomi nodded, grateful for his support. As she moved away, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of respect for Jackson. He knew how to handle difficult situations, but more importantly, he knew when to step in and when to let her lead. The rest of the night went smoothly, and by the time the last guest left, Naomi felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had managed the floor, dealt with the guest complaint, and ensured the restaurant maintained its high standards. But it wasn't just about the success of the night. Naomi was beginning to realize something more important. She wasn't just the manager of this restaurant. She was part of something bigger, something that she had built with her own 2 hands. And with Jackson's mentorship, she was learning how to be the kind of leader she had always wanted to be. As the staff began to clear the tables and prepare for the next day's service, Naomi stood at the front of the restaurant once again, watching the lights dim. She had come a long way, but she knew her journey was far from over. The road ahead would be filled with more challenges, but she was ready to face them. Because this was her time. This was her moment to shine. As the weeks passed, Naomi continued to rise in her role, her confidence and leadership solidifying with every challenge she overcame. The restaurant was thriving, and so was she. But with success came new challenges, and Naomi found herself balancing the growth of the business with her own personal growth. Jackson had always been there, a steady mentor guiding her through the toughest moments. But Naomi knew that it was time for her to truly step into her own. The restaurant's anniversary approached, and Jackson came to Naomi with a proposal. "It's time for us to celebrate how far we've come, Naomi," he said, standing in the office, his hands resting on the back of a chair. "I'm thinking of hosting an exclusive event for our top clients and partners. You've done an incredible job, and I want you to take the lead on this." Naomi's heart skipped a beat. The thought of leading such a high-profile event filled her with a mix of excitement and nerves. But as she looked at Jackson, she realized that this was her moment. It wasn't just about proving herself anymore. It was about embracing the success she had worked so hard for. "I'm ready," Naomi said, her voice steady. Jackson nodded with a smile. "I knew you would be." Over the next few weeks, Naomi worked tirelessly to plan every detail of the anniversary event. She coordinated with the kitchen, the waitstaff, and the guests to ensure everything would run smoothly. She worked late nights, pouring her energy into making sure that everything would be perfect. She was no longer just a manager. She was a leader, taking charge and making decisions that would impact the restaurant's future. The night of the event arrived, and Naomi stood at the entrance, watching the guests arrive in their elegant attire. The restaurant had been transformed for the evening, with soft lighting and beautiful floral arrangements. The atmosphere was electric, filled with anticipation for what was to come. Naomi greeted each guest with a smile, her confidence shining through as she made sure everything was in place. The evening went off without a hitch. The food was exceptional, the service flawless, and the guests were impressed by the attention to detail. Jackson watched Naomi from across the room, his eyes filled with pride. She had taken the reins and made this event her own. By the end of the night, the guests were raving about the success of the evening, and Naomi felt a deep sense of accomplishment. As the last of the guests filed out, Naomi stood in the middle of the restaurant, taking a moment to absorb everything. The journey she had started months ago, as a waitress who had struggled to make ends meet, had led her here. She had faced challenges, dealt with adversity, and earned the respect of those around her. She had grown into a leader, someone who wasn't just managing a restaurant, but shaping its future. Jackson approached her, a proud smile on his face. "You did an amazing job tonight," he said, his voice warm. Naomi smiled back, feeling the weight of his words. "Thank you, Jackson. I couldn't have done it without your support." Jackson shook his head. "You did this. You earned it." Naomi felt a surge of gratitude. She had worked so hard, and now she was seeing the results. But more than that, she had grown. She had learned to trust herself, to lead with confidence, and to never settle for less than she deserved. As Naomi stood there, looking around at the restaurant she had helped build, she realized that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be filled with more challenges, but she was no longer afraid. She was ready. The next day, Jackson called her into his office. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice thoughtful. "You've proven yourself time and time again, Naomi, and I think it's time to take the next step." Naomi raised an eyebrow, curious. "What do you mean?" "I want you to become a partner in the business," Jackson said, his eyes serious. Naomi's heart skipped a beat. She had worked so hard for this moment, and now it was finally here. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Jackson nodded. "You've earned it. You've shown me that you have the vision and the leadership to take this restaurant to new heights. I want you to be a part of it, not just as a manager, but as an owner." Naomi stood there, her mind racing. This was the opportunity she had dreamed of, the chance to truly shape the future of the restaurant. She had worked hard for every step, every success, and now she was being offered a chance to own a piece of it. "I don't know what to say," Naomi whispered. Jackson smiled. "Say yes." And with that, Naomi knew that everything had changed. She had started this journey as a waitress, unsure of where it would lead. But now, she was stepping into a future that was entirely her own. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Naomi knew that with hard work, determination, and the support of those who believed in her, she could achieve anything. She was no longer just a part of the restaurant. She was a key player in its future. The story of Naomi's journey was just beginning, and she was ready to write the next chapter.